Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie The Brutalist in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called The Brutalist. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I am going to tell you, I am also going to give you all the information on which OTT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office, collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film's storylines, star-cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so let's start the video. The Brutalist is a 2024 epic period drama film directed and produced by Brady Corbet from a script he co-wrote with Mona Fastvold. An international co-production between the United States, United Kingdom, and Hungary, it stars Adrien Brody as Laszlo Toth, a Hungarian-born Jewish architect who survives the Holocaust and emigrates to the United States, where he struggles to achieve the American dream until a wealthy client changes his life. The cast also features Felicity Jones, Guy Pearce, Joe Alwyn, Raffi Cassidy, Stacey Martin, Emma Laird, Isaac de Bancolet, and Alessandro Nivola. The Brutalist premiered at the 81st Venice International Film Festival on September 1st, 2024, where Corbett was awarded the Silver Lion for Best Direction. It received critical acclaim and was named one of the top 10 films of 2024 by the American Film Institute. It won 3 awards at the 82nd Golden Globe Awards, including Best Motion Picture Drama. It was released in the United States by A24 on December 20th, 2024, and set to be released in the United Kingdom by Universal Pictures and Focus Features on January 24, 2025. Plot. Part 1. The Enigma of Arrival. Hungarian Jewish architect and Holocaust survivor Laszlo Toth, forcibly separated from his wife and orphaned niece, emigrates to America. A former brutalist architect, Laszlo stays with relatives in Philadelphia while he looks for work. In 1947, Laszlo helps with his cousin Attila's furniture business. They are commissioned to renovate part of a home owned by wealthy industrialist Harrison Lee Van Buren at the behest of his son Harry while his father is away. Harrison arrives home early, enraged at the state of the renovations, and sacks the men unpaid. Later, Attila asks Laszlo to leave their home, citing their firing and his wife's false claims that Laszlo made advances on her. In 1950, Laszlo, now a heroin user, is living in charity housing with Gordon, a single father. Laszlo befriended soon after immigrating. Harrison turns up to tell him the architectural community has lauded his modern renovation and to pay the money he owes Laszlo, which the men then spend on heroin. Harrison invites Laszlo to a party in his honor, where it is revealed that the Hungarian was an accomplished architect in Europe. Aware of Laszlo's desires to leave a monumental legacy, Harrison commissions him to construct a grand project in tribute to his late mother, a community center comprising a library, theater, gymnasium, and a chapel. Work begins immediately with Laszlo living and working on site, employing Gordon, both now fully functioning heroin addicts. For Laszlo's services, Harrison has his personal lawyer expedite the immigration of his wife and niece to America. Part 2. The Hardcore of Beauty. In 1953, Laszlo greets his wife and niece, Erzsébet and Zsófia, at the train station, where he discovers that due to their suffering in wartime, Erzsébet is wheelchair-bound with osteoporosis and Zsófia has become mute. During construction, Laszlo clashes with other developers hired by Harrison over departing from his design, and Harry chides Laszlo as being merely tolerated, with lewd remarks about Zsófia. Laszlo warns her to avoid Harry, who it is implied already assaulted her. Following the derailment of the train carrying materials and ensuing legal costs, a furious Harrison abandons the construction, putting everyone involved out of work. Years later, Laszlo now works for an architecture firm in New York City, where he and Erzsébet live a metropolitan life. Zsófia, no longer mute, is expecting a child with her new Jewish husband. She announces they are moving to Jerusalem in the then newly established state of Israel. One day, Harrison contacts Laszlo to resume construction. While in the mines of Carrara to purchase marble, Harrison rapes Laszlo in a show of dominance and denigrates him. Back on site, an increasingly traumatized Laszlo begins to unravel, becoming aggressive, chaotic, and firing Gordon. After Laszlo almost kills Erzsébet by attempting to treat her osteoporosis with his heroin, she proposes they live in Jerusalem with Zsófia and her family, to which he agrees. One night, Erzsébet pays Harrison a visit at his home, where she calls him a rapist in front of his family and associates. At this, Harry violently attacks her, guests start leaving, and Harrison disappears within the community center. Epilogue: the first architecture biennale. In 1980, Erzsébet has died, and a retrospective of Laszlo's work is held in Venice. The exhibition includes the community center, finally completed after a decade's hiatus. A now-adult Zsófia, accompanied by her now-teenage daughter and an aging Laszlo, gives a speech highlighting how their experience with the Holocaust inspired these works. She ends by recounting what her father once told her: "No matter what the others try and sell you, it is the destination, not the journey." Cast: Adrien Brody as Laszlo Toth, a Hungarian Jewish architect and Holocaust survivor who emigrates to America. Felicity Jones as Erzsébet Toth, Laszlo's wife. Guy Pearce as Harrison Lee Van Buren, a wealthy industrialist who becomes Laszlo's most important client. Joe Alwyn as Harry Lee Van Buren, Harrison's entitled and pompous young son. Raffi Cassidy as Zsófia, Laszlo's mute orphan teenage niece. Ariane Lebed as adult Zsófia. Stacey Martin as Maggie Van Buren, Harry's twin sister. Emma Laird as Audrey, Attila's wife. Isaac de Bancole as Gordon, Laszlo's friend. Alessandro Nivola as Attila, a furniture store owner in Philadelphia and Laszlo's cousin. Michael Epp as Jim Simpson. Jonathan Hyde as Leslie Woodrow. Peter Polycarpou as Michael Hoffman. Maria Sand as Michelle Hoffman. Salvatore Sansone as Orazio, Laszlo's friend in Carrara. Production. Development. In September 2018, Deadline reported that director Brady Corbet had chosen the period drama The Brutalist as his next project following the world premiere of his second feature film, Vox Lux. New York-based Andrew Lauren Productions, ALP, developed the screenplay with Corbet and financed the film. Corbet co-wrote the screenplay with his partner Mona Fastvold, with whom he co-wrote the 2015 film The Childhood of a Leader and the 2018 film Vox Lux 10. The film was originally announced as a co-production between Andrew Lauren and DJ Guggenheim for ALP, Trevor Matthews and Nick Gordon for Brookstreet Pictures, Brian Young's 360, and the Polish company Medance, and executive produced by Christine Vachon, Pamela Koffler, and David Hinojosa of Killer Films. On September 2, 2020, Deadline announced that Joel Edgerton and Marion Cotillard had been cast as the film's leads, Laszlo Toth and Erzsébet Toth, respectively, and that Mark Rylance was cast in the role of Laszlo's mysterious client. Sebastian Stan, Vanessa Kirby, Isaac de Bancole, Alessandro Nivola, Raffi Cassidy, and Stacey Martin were also announced in unknown roles. Corbett described The Brutalist as a film which celebrates the triumphs of the most daring and accomplished visionaries, our ancestors, and the project which is so far the closest to his heart and family history. Filming was scheduled to begin in Poland in January 2021. Protagonist Pictures presented the project to buyers at the 2020 Toronto International Film Festival. The film takes place in Pennsylvania and was shot in English, Yiddish, Hungarian, and Italian. The character of Laszlo Toth was inspired by several real-life architects and designers, including Paul Rudolph, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, and Marcel Breuer. Several of Toth's furniture designs in the film are highly reminiscent of Breuer's work, including the Seska chair and long chair. Director of photography Lol Crawley, editor David Jancho, and costume designer Kate Forbes were announced on March 9, 2023. Production designer Judy Becker was announced on April 11, 2023. Daniel Bloomberg composed the film's score. On April 11, 2023, it was announced that Adrien Brody, Felicity Jones, Guy Pearce, Joe Alwyn, Jonathan Hyde, Emma Laird, and Peter Polycarpou would star in the film, while Edgerton, Cotillard, Rylance, Stan, and Kirby were no longer attached. It was also announced that the film would be co-produced by the U.S.-based companies Andrew Lauren Productions and Yellow Bear, along with the United Kingdom's Brookstreet and Intake Films, and Hungary's Proton Cinema, and financed by Brookstreet UK, Yellow Bear, Lip Sync Productions, Richmond Pictures, Mayohas Studio, Carte Blanche, Kofilazir, and Parable Media. CAA Media Finance handles U.S. sales, with Protagonist Pictures handling international sales. Focus Features subsequently acquired international distribution rights to the film. Filming was originally set to start in 2020, but it was postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It was then scheduled to start in January 2021, but was postponed to August 2021, only to be delayed to the second quarter of 2022. Corbet said filming was postponed several times due to the pandemic, as well as several pregnancies and deaths in the families of the film's cast and crew. After several delays, filming finally began in Budapest, Hungary on March 16, 2023. Production then moved to Carrara, Tuscany on April 29, 2023, and was completed on May 5, 2023. The film was shot using the VistaVision process and cameras, which involved shooting horizontally on 35mm film stock, which was then scanned with the intention of also making prints for a 70mm film release, which has the same height and was the most practical format to show the original size of the VistaVision frame when projecting film. Corbet explained the choice of VistaVision was also aesthetic. It just seemed like the best way to access that period, 1950s, was to shoot on something that was engineered in that same decade. In addition, the film is presented in 2 acts with a 15-minute intermission. Music. Main article, The Brutalist, soundtrack. The film's score was composed by Daniel Blumberg, who had previously worked with Corbet on the short film Judo, 2019, with the two working together on the film over a span of 7 years. The album containing the score was released on December 13, 2024, through Milan Records. Blumberg and Corbet wanted continuous music for the film's first 10 minutes, resulting in the opening sequence of The Brutalist being choreographed and shot to Blumberg's demos. The overture features pianists John Tilbury, Sophie Agnell-Eyre, and Simon Seeger, trumpeter Axel Dorner, and saxophonist Evan Parker, all of whom appear throughout the soundtrack. Synth-pop musician Vince Clarke plays the synthesizer on Epilogue, Venice. The experimental Construction was the first track Blumberg wrote for the score. An early demo was composed on a prepared piano at London's Café Odo to create a sound similar to construction noises. Erzsébet, one of the score's themes, was played by Blumberg live on a piano, since Corbet wanted the actors to hear the music while shooting. The train noises from the scene were eventually incorporated into the track's final version. Release. The Brutalist had its world premiere at the 81st Venice International Film Festival on September 1, 2024, where it competed for the Golden Lion and won the Silver Lion for Corbet. It also played at the Toronto International Film Festival on September 6, 2024. The film's festival run also included selections for screenings at the 2024 New York Film Festival, the 69th Valladolid International Film Festival, and the 31st Austin Film Festival. 3536. A week after its premiere at Venice, A24 acquired U.S. distribution rights to the film for just under $10 million in what was described as a competitive situation. It was released in the U.S. by A24 on December 20, 2024, and is scheduled to be released in the United Kingdom by Universal Pictures and Focus Features on January 24, 2025. It was screened in IMAX theaters 2 days prior to its limited theatrical release for New York and Los Angeles, before being screened in IMAX nationwide throughout January. It was featured in the Limelight section of the 54th International Film Festival Rotterdam, to be screened in February 2025. Reception. Critical response. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 93% of 167 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 8.8/10. The website's consensus reads, "Structurally beautiful and suffused with Adrien Brody's soulful performance, writer-director Brady Corbet's immaculately designed The Brutalist is a towering tribute to the immigrant experience." Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 91 out of 100 based on 39 critics, indicating universal acclaim. The film received a 5-star review from The Guardian's Peter Bradshaw, who called it an amazing and engrossing epic. He continued, The Brutalist obviously takes something from Ayn Rand, but also from Bernard Malamud and Saul Bellow in its depiction of the U.S. immigrant adventure and the promise of success. But maybe Corbett and Fastvold go further and faster into how dizzyingly sensual and sexual it all is. Bradshaw concluded, "It is an electrifying piece of work, stunningly shot by cinematographer Lol Crawley and superbly designed by Judy Becker. I emerged from this movie light-headed and euphoric, dizzy with rubbernecking at its monumental vastness." In a review for Vogue, the cinematography, score, costumes, and production design were described as sumptuous, impressively stylish, and possessing a staggering ambition. NPR included the film in their list of the best movies and TV of 2024, with critic Bob Mondello writing that The Brutalist is gorgeous, conceptually stunning, and dizzying in its savagery about cracks in the foundation of the American dream. RogerEbert.com writers named The Brutalist in the top slot of the Roger Ebert's 10 best films of 2024, which is determined by board account of the site's writers. Filmmakers Oliver Stone, Tim Fellbaum, Drew Goddard, Reynaldo Marcus Green, Don Hertzfeldt, Matt Johnson, Karen Kusama, David Lowery, Lance Oppenheim, Paul Schrader, Celine Song, and Malcolm Washington have cited it as among their favorite films of 2024. One of the many things that makes Brady Corbett's The Brutalist so essential is how it defies easy categorization. It is about so many things without specifically hammering, highlighting, or bullet pointing them. Sure, it's impossible to miss the commentary on capitalism embedded in the script by Corbett and Mona Fastvold. Still, it's also a story of immigration, addiction, Zionism, architecture, inequity, class, violence, and even filmmaking. The word ambitious is overused in modern criticism, but the very existence of The Brutalist feels like a miracle. An original story shot on VistaVision cameras, released in 70mm, complete with overture and intermission. It's a film that turns inward into itself, winding its themes around its characters like a great American novel. Adrien Brody does the best work of his career as Laszlo Toth, who is introduced in an essential tone-setting sequence. At first, it's hard to tell where he is, surrounded by people in an overcrowded space with the cacophony of conversations around him and the booming score from Daniel Blumberg starting to make itself known. As he moves through the crowd, he pushes himself through doors and into sunlight, his face bursting with happiness at the sight of the Statue of Liberty. But Corbett and cinematographer Lol Crawley warp the moment by presenting the iconic structure upside down at the top of the frame. The statue shifts to the side, but it's never upright, a warped symbol of the American dream, an overture of the film's main theme to follow in the form of an unforgettable image. This prologue also includes a quote from Goethe that feels like the most pronounced Corbett and Fastvold get in How to Read What Follows. None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe themselves free. Toth believes himself free, getting a job at his cousin Attila's Alessandro Nivola, always good furniture shop, notably named Miller & Sons, despite there being no Miller and no Sons. Like that floating statue, Corbett and Fastvold are seeding themes that will grow later, playing with the artifice of capitalism, a structure that sells the comfort of a family business over actual artistry. When Toth designs a chair to be put in the front window, Attila's wife Audrey, Emma Laird, tells him it looks like a tricycle. This is a film that experiments with form while also being narratively about how people exploit artistry and value function over expression. It will eventually become a story of a hollow monument, a building with a benefactor who wants to make something for everyone but has no creative passion of his own to put in this empty structure. Laszlo's life changes when Harry Lee Van Buren, Joe Alwyn, comes to Miller & Sons to hire them to remodel his father Harrison's library while he's away from home. The project falls apart when Harrison, Guy Pearce, returns home in a fury, angry that his house is being torn apart by people he's never met and refusing to pay. The drama leads to an emotional decision by Attila, who kicks Laszlo out of his home, sending him into an addiction spiral with his friend Gordon, Isaac de Bancolet, perfectly understated, until Harrison returns with an apology. He brings Laszlo into his world of upper-class snobs, people who display their wealth like it has any meaning, even to a Holocaust survivor, who they see as another object to own. Harrison offers to help Laszlo bring his wife Erzsébet, Felicity Jones, and their niece Zofia, Raffi Cassidy, over from Europe, but it's a prelude to what he really wants: the design of a community center that will serve as a tribute to Harrison's recently deceased mother. It's a place to gather, but also a place that he controls, and one that he claims will look forward but is anchored in the past by being a monument to his mother. There's a key scene in the film just before Harrison makes this public proposal in which he asks Laszlo why he's an architect, and the survivor speaks about how his structures have reportedly survived the war and how they will speak for generations after the conflict. "My buildings were designed to endure such erosion," he says. Kind of like film. It's not hard to read The Brutalist, a work with technical ambition like no other this year, as a commentary on its own existence, a monument to the art of filmmaking as much as anything. Harrison seeks to control Laszlo from the very beginning. He uses rage in that first scene. He literally throws money at him in a key second-half scene and then asks him to give it back, and the climax of the first pre-intermission half sets their relationship perfectly. After offering legal assistance to make his dreams come true in a manner that will surely tie them together, he then basically forces him to move in by not giving him a ride back that night and forcing him to listen to his ideas the next day. Harrison will eventually cross all lines of physical and moral righteousness, a clear parallel to how capitalism destroys art, taking from it what it wants and needs before disposing of it. Some have criticized the sharp turn that the film takes with Harrison and Laszlo, but repeat viewings make it clear how much that kind of brutal ownership is there from the very beginning. Of course, an American epic like The Brutalist only works if the cast is on the same page as the creator, and the majority of the performers here deliver. Jones feels a bit miscast and stumbles in a late-movie dramatic confrontation, but Brody and Pearce make up for any flaws in the ensemble by carrying the second half of the film. Brody's performance is one of broad expressiveness, the overflowing emotion of seeing the Statue of Liberty, or the tears that roll down his face on hugging his cousin, and then watching that joy leave his countenance as the world around him erodes it away. It's a strong contender for the best performance of the year in any film. Pearce balances him perfectly, playing Harrison as a force of selfish nature, giving the film a much-needed jolt from his very first moment on screen, and perfectly capturing the kind of wealthy monster who discards anyone around him once he's used them up. The Brutalist is also a technical marvel, most notably in Crawley's fluid cinematography, crafting compositions that look gorgeous in 70mm without ever feeling overly showy. His work is organic and beautiful, and it's anchored by excellent editing from David Jancho and an effective score by Bloomberg. The sound design as a whole is a load-bearing beam in this film's construction. From the hum of that first scene to the many sequences of men at work, the background noise of the American dream after World War II. Some will look at the 215-minute runtime of The Brutalist and bring out that dreaded word when it comes to serious, long movies: pretentious. Of course, it's pretentious. You couldn't make this movie effectively without pretension. But one person's pretentious is another's ambitious, and I wish we had more movies this pretentious, this unapologetic, this willing to do more with film than so many even consider. The Brutalist is a work that incorporates well-known world history into two of the definitive forms of expression of the 20th century in architecture and filmmaking, becoming a commentary on both capitalism and art. Both are essential to the story of the human experience. Both can be beautiful, both can be brutal. It's always interesting when a movie arrives on the scene to immeasurable praise. Your anticipation builds and your expectations rise. And then you see the film and you get to see for yourself if the product warranted the enormous hype. That has certainly happened with The Brutalist, a 215-minute arthouse epic that has been heralded as a masterpiece by more than a few enthusiastic early viewers. The Brutalist certainly had my attention, with Academy Award winner Adrien Brody in the lead role, and the criminally underappreciated Guy Pearce getting a meaty supporting part. I love the idea of an immigrant saga beginning in the latter days of World War II and spanning several decades, and I love that it would attempt to examine the post-war Jewish experience through a fresh and compelling lens. All of those things speak to the strengths of The Brutalist, And for a while, they were working in such harmony that I wondered if I too would be throwing out the M word to describe director Brady Corbet's work. But over time, you begin to notice that its brilliance is too often dimmed by his ambitions. There's no denying the excellence of the Brutalist when Corbet is working in rhythm, which he does for most of the film. At the same time, there are nagging issues that he just can't shake. More on those in a second. Beginning in 1947, Brody plays Laszlo Toth, a Hungarian Jewish architect and Holocaust survivor who manages to escape his home country and emigrate to the United States. Once established there, he hopes to find and bring over his wife, Elizabeth, Felicity Jones, and his niece, Zsofia, Raffi Cassidy, who he was forcibly separated from during the Nazi roundups. After arriving in New York City, Laszlo takes a bus to Philadelphia, where he's put up and given a job by his immigrant cousin Attila, Alessandro Nivola, who runs a furniture store with his American wife Audrey, Emma Laird. Laszlo gets his first real chance to show his architectural skills after the pampered children of a wealthy industrialist, Harrison Lee Van Buren Pearce, hire him to turn their father's dated study into a modernized library. Laszlo's renovation is phenomenal, yet the job doesn't go as planned, and he's forced to head out on his own. Years pass, and Laszlo is living in a homeless shelter and working whatever jobs he can get. That's when he gets a surprise visit from Harrison, whose new library has been making the rounds in popular architecture magazines. It prompted Harrison to do some research, where he discovered Laszlo's renowned work while in Budapest. Now the enamored Harrison wants to hire Laszlo to build a community center on his property in the small borough of Doylestown. He will be well compensated and allowed to stay in the guest house on the grounds. Laszlo accepts the offer and immediately gets to work. Jump ahead to 1953. The construction of the community center is slowly consuming Laszlo. But he gets a reprieve when Elizabeth and Zsofia arrive in Philly. Their reunion is sweet, but before long, Laszlo is back focused on his work. Meanwhile, his growing addiction to heroin is becoming hard to keep secret. It all points towards an inevitable collision, but the road to it is slowed by narrative potholes. It's as if Corbet and his co-writer Mona Fastvold have built two avenues of self-destruction that rarely intersect. This speaks to one of the movie's most frustrating issues. It feels as if we're navigating two different movies, telling two different stories. One is a captivating feature film about a Jewish immigrant crushed under the weight of an unforgiving new country and his own ambition. The other is an erratic short film about a man's drug-fueled psychosexual foray into prostitution and pornography. If you squint hard enough, you can find connections, but they're too threadbare to have any impact. Regardless, the performances from Brody and Pearce never falter, and both should be shoo-ins for Oscar nominations. Brody powerfully emanates a similar raw humanity as he did in The Pianist, while Pearce convincingly balances ego and charm right up until an out-of-the-blue action jarringly strips away anything resembling nuance. Jones doesn't fare as well. She is handcuffed by a one-note role that leaves her frustrated and victimized despite being the most clear-eyed of the bunch. If you told me that Brady Corbet possessed the ability to walk on water, repel bullets, or phase through walls, I'd believe it. To make a movie like The Brutalist requires such a superhuman level of self-confidence that it might as well be accompanied by other preternatural powers. The Brutalist spans 33 years on screen and over 3.5 hours of runtime, including a 15-minute intermission at its midpoint. It's the first film in decades to be fully shot in VistaVision, and at the Venice Film Festival, where it had its premiere, it was projected on 70mm. It's a sweeping work about a Hungarian Jewish immigrant and diasporic trauma in the wake of World War II, from a filmmaker who's not himself Jewish, but who hurls himself into details of his main character's journey from a ravaged Europe to a booming Pennsylvania with such specificity that you'll find yourself Googling whether this is another Tar situation or whether Laszlo Toth was a real person. He wasn't. It's impossible not to be impressed by the sheer audacity of the Brutalist's existence, even if the finished product doesn't end up matching its ambitions. Set aside all its film geek specs, and it still feels willed into existence to be the kind of movie that isn't made anymore, a grand American saga that's openly intent on telling a big story with big ideas. And at its center is Adrien Brody, doing better work than he's done in years, or possibly ever, as Laszlo, who in 1947 washes up in Philadelphia at the doorstep of a cousin, Attila, Alessandro Nivola, sure he's lost everything. Brody won an Oscar for The Pianist, the movie that served as his breakthrough, and despite working steadily since, and becoming a regular in Wes Anderson's ensembles, never reached that level of work again. But he's remarkable in The Brutalist, in a way that makes you feel like you're seeing him afresh, with his open parentheses of a body and that handsome hangdog face that's always ruefully giving away a little more than his characters want. We only gradually learn what a big deal Laszlo was in Budapest before the war, but Brody offers glimpses of the respected architect the man used to be in his blunt assessment of the furniture Attila sells in his store, in the care he takes when crafting his own designs, and in his indifference to anyone who doesn't appreciate the value of his work. Laszlo has lost the love of his life, Erzsébet, Felicity Jones, not to death, as he initially thought, but to the snarls of bureaucracy and legal whims that keep his wife stuck at the Austrian border with his niece Jofia, Raffi Cassidy, who's so traumatized by what she went through that she stopped speaking. Without her, he's half a ghost, living in storage closets and shoveling coal, and only sparking to life when his friend Gordon, Isaac de Bancale, takes him to a jazz club, or when he and Attila get a commission to rework the library of a wealthy industrialist named Harrison Lee Van Buren, Guy Pearce, a job that will alter the course of Laszlo's life for years to come. The Brutalist is a movie about desperation and anguish, though its willingness to keep that element below the surface of all of its dramas is gratifying. Laszlo and Attila and Erzsébet don't discuss what they went through, though it informs everything about their sometimes erratic, electrified behavior, like the way Attila has shed all traces of his Jewishness, or how Erzsébet, when she eventually reunites with her husband, requests sex from him in a way that suggests they should be able to use it as a shortcut to sealing up their psychic wounds. Laszlo himself is a man in pieces who can barely pretend to hold himself together, and he teeters on the edge of falling apart so often in the film's first half that it feels like a miracle when he slips into the blustering Harrison's good graces and gets chosen to design a community center on a hill in Doylestown. Harrison is a self-made man who collects first editions in Madeira like he can rack up a high score in being cultured. Pearce is menacing and funny in the role, especially when Harrison informs Laszlo, more than once, that he finds their conversations intellectually stimulating. Having Harrison as a patron is like holding a tiger by the tail, but managing him and his slimy little shit of a son, Harry, Joe Alwyn, offers Laszlo a chance to not just return to architecture, but to be the author of a wildly ambitious project that, if he can fend off all other forces, will represent a vision that is purely his. It fits that The Brutalist is about architectural auteurism. Corbet, who writes all of his scripts with his wife, fellow filmmaker Mona Fastvold, is a former actor who got his start as a teenager on features like 13 and Mysterious Skin before moving into directing, and each of his now 3 features is an individual campaign in establishing his seriousness and self-seriousness as a filmmaker and laying out his as a major creative voice. He has a particular interest in placing his characters against a backdrop of tumultuous historical moments. His directorial debut, 2015's The Childhood of a Leader, depicted the coming of age of a future dictator in post-World War I France, while his caustic Natalie Portman lead pop star drama Vox Lux spanned a Columbine-like school shooting in September 11th. This desire to ground his films in the weight of momentous events has previously struck me as hopelessly thirsty, in the same way that his critiques of American culture have felt a little glib. The Brutalist is the first feature of his that's actually led by his characters, rather than pinning those characters onto major milestones like display butterflies, and even then it loses its focus by the end, rushing toward a conclusion that's presented as a hasty reveal rather than something you really want the movie to dwell on. Still, there's half a great movie here, and in the high ceilings of Laszlo's community center, the swell of the score, and those wide shots of columns going up on a green hillside, there's plenty of room to grow. I concur with the argument that anyone who can binge a full season of a television show has no right, no fuss about a film with an extensive runtime. But I would also argue that filmmakers who orchestrate those extensive runtimes forge a contract with the audience. A movie that runs over 3 hours asks for a commitment and comes with an inherent promise that the work needs that time to tell its full story and deliver its full impact. Sometimes this pact is broken, and what audiences get delivered are slogs that bring to mind the adjective overindulgent. Brady Corbet's The Brutalist is thankfully not one of these cases. While it's not wholly the breathtaking experience that the 215-minute feature very clearly wants to be, it is properly molded as a cinematic epic in the classic sense and absorbs you in its tale about immigrant life in the United States. Regardless of how you feel about the titular architectural style, note, I generally find it to be ugly and off-putting, you're compelled by the journey of the demon-ridden protagonist who is both working to establish a life for himself in a new country and realize an immense artistic vision. Said protagonist is Laszlo Toth, Adrien Brody, a Hungarian immigrant and architect who travels to the United States in the late 1940s, having survived the horrors of the Holocaust. He is forced to leave behind his wife Erzsébet, Felicity Jones, and mute niece Zsófia, Raffi Cassidy, but he plans to get settled in Philadelphia with support from his cousin Attila, Alessandro Nivola, and then have his family join them. Employed in Attila's furniture business, Laszlo is commissioned by Harry Lee Van Buren, Joe Alwyn, the son of a wealthy industrialist, to use his skills to secretly renovate his father's library. Harrison Lee Van Buren, Guy Pearce, is initially horrified the work and refuses to pay him, but when the library ends up earning praise from high society, the man tracks Laszlo down, and he not only compensates him for the past work, but asks him to create a monumental community center in the style of the celebrated buildings he designed in Europe. Constructed as an investigation of the immigrant experience via character study, The Brutalist is reflective of the eponymous style in that it doesn't present an overly complicated or complex narrative, but it has its own boldness as an honest chronicle of an ambitious but deeply flawed artist. The film is compelling because you want to see Laszlo to achieve the mythical American dream and reunite with the people he loves most in the world. But it also doesn't shy away from his substance abuse issues, specifically his addiction to heroin, and uncompromising attitude. Written by Brady Corbet and Mona Fastvold, the story is deliberate but never feels slow. It doesn't hinge on twists, revelations, or shocks for story developments, and instead bets on audience investment in the characters and succeeds. Truth be told, I was shocked looking at my watch when the theater lights came on at the start of the movie's intermission, as I was surprised how deep into the cinematic experience I was. I'll also add that while the intermission is appreciated for the sake of hitting the bathroom and stretching one's legs, I'd argue that 15 minutes is too long of a break, as with 5 minutes left to go, I was already itching to see how the rest of the film would unfold. The runtime may be daunting from an outside perspective, but it's not something you actually think about while watching. The ensemble cast in The Brutalist as a whole is tremendous, with standouts including Guy Pearce's savoir complex afflicted, patronizing Harrison Lee Van Buren to Felicity Jones' Erzsébet, who takes the spotlight in a third-act confrontation that is easily one of the most powerful dramatic moments in 2024 cinema. The true anchor of the film, however, is Adrien Brody's turn as Laszlo Toth, as the actor makes you feel every moment of the character's pride and failure. Brody's charisma brings the protagonist's heart and ambition to the surface, apparent from the start as the character first arrives by boat into New York, but he also carries intense pain in his eyes. He projects an impressive strength and confidence when he is in his element, unleashing fire, battling against anyone who makes any effort to undermine his architectural authority, but also great vulnerability as he succumbs to his addiction, expresses his love for his family, and suffers horrific humiliation. It's a marathon showcase for the Oscar winner's talent, and it's a success in all respects. In an age when the word epic in the film world is reserved almost exclusively for genre blockbusters, The Brutalist is an awesome and rare achievement that earns the moniker with its tremendous scope. In both its storytelling and aesthetic creation, the cinematography is breathtaking at times, and the accomplishments in the production design are utterly staggering in recognition of the production's limited budget. I didn't walk away from it thinking that I had experienced one of the best movies of the year, but it's also undeniably a unique marvel in 21st century cinema. Set between the 1940s and 1980s, visionary architect Laszlo Toth, Adrien Brody, Asteroid City, arrives in America from post-war Europe. He escapes the horrors of war to rebuild his life and work. In a strange new country as a Jewish man, Laszlo settles in Pennsylvania. There, Harrison Lee Van Buren, Guy Pearce, mayor of Easttown, a wealthy and prominent industrialist, recognizes his architectural talents. He hires Laszlo to build an ambitious project that will define his life, yet power and legacy come at a heavy cost. Epic isn't enough to describe The Brutalist. There's something impressive about seeing a $6 million feel-good movie which transitions into a dark drama have such a massive scale. It's almost at the level of a high-budget blockbuster like Dune Part 2. The Brutalist is a sweeping tale of the American dream. Most importantly, it questions imaginative people if aspiring to create is worthwhile when your art hurts those dearest to you. Corbet and co-screenwriter Fastvold don't sugarcoat this thematic through-line. They often go to upsetting lengths to show the physical turmoil it can cause on the body. Everyone wants a piece of your talent and will stop at nothing until they have a part. This is a sentiment shared by many filmmakers, including Corbet, as he stated in the Q&A following the screening. To say Adrien Brody has never been better should feel wrong coming from a performer of his stature. However, that statement rings true here. There is a stoic nature to Brody's Laszlo, a stoicism that hides a deep sense of pain and resentment. As an immigrant, you often encounter individuals who view your experience as some kind of luxury to brag about. Their support comes off as performative, not genuine. Brody conveys this beautifully through his line delivery, his interactions with the supporting cast, and the physicality brought to Laszlo. When he needs to be funny, his timing is impeccable, having to catch up with Guy Pearce's effortless charisma. Pearce may have delivered my favorite supporting role of the year in The Brutalist. From the second he shows up, he takes command of the scenery, drawing attention to himself and making everyone opposite of him feel small. His introduction is played for laughs, a personality trait stretched out for the entirety of the movie's first half. Meanwhile, there is a sinister nature to how he seduces the audience into liking him, similar to what he does to Laszlo. Once the second half kicks in, Pearce's Harrison slowly drops the mask and reveals the evil within him, just as the film shifts tonally. It's a brutal change for our roster of characters, albeit one that fits the core theme of the immigrant experience. It portrays the torture that creates something magnificent for people with selfish interests. A light is at the end of the tunnel amidst the darkness when Felicity Jones enters the picture. She becomes the anchor for both Laszlo and the film until the end. Jones brings a sweetness to Erzsébet Toth, Laszlo's wife, that is enchanting. Her sweetness should not be mistaken for weakness, though. Her strong character shines through, holding her ground opposite Brody and Pearce. A confrontation between Erzsébet, Harry, Joe Alwyn, Kinds of Kindness, and Maggie, Stacey Martin, The Night House, Harrison's Children, comes on top as one of the movie's best, most tense sequences in which Jones's talents are at full display. The Brutalist holds admirable performances across the board, although none would be as emotionally compelling if it were not for the way cinematographer Lol Crawley's photography captures the actors and the landscapes. Corbet and Crawley's decision to shoot The Brutalist on 35mm film stock using VistaVision cameras, later on scanned at a resolution close to 70mm, proves to have been the right call. The movie's visual style feels timeless yet haunting. Structures are framed as these intimidating behemoths, reducing our main players to nothing but insignificant ants in their presence. At the same time, there is also a warmth and beauty to them, coming to life in the sunlight and promising a future filled with potential. Visuals are just one half of the complete picture here, though. The sound design is just as unreal as the moving images. Somehow, the sound captures the absurdity, hopefulness, horror, and manipulation that our characters undergo. Composer Daniel Blumberg adds to the auditory delight with his magnificent original score. Earlier I mentioned the film's tremendous scope, and a part of selling the Brutalist scale comes from Blumberg's work. As Laszlo grows obsessed with creating the perfect building for Harrison, the score keeps reaching highs that make you as pumped for the work as much as Laszlo is. With that said, Blumberg does stop every once in a while to represent the abuse each character inflicts on the others through hauntingly beautiful music. His soundtrack is one of the year's best scores alongside Hans Zimmer's Dune Part 2 and Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's efforts in Challengers. It fills me with joy that the great American epic is still alive and well today. In 2023, Christopher Nolan proved audiences crave intimate storytelling a la There Will Be Blood or Schindler's List with his Best Picture winner, Oppenheimer. While I don't see The Brutalist being a massive hit as Nolan's epic, movies of its kind are relevant and important to our current climate. What does it mean to be an artist? Can we aspire to be better when surrounded by people who only want to take advantage of what we can offer? Hate and violence remain prominent in our lives, so what can we look forward to for us to keep going? Those are tricky questions you will have to answer for yourself, but also meaningful inquiry, 60s. The Brutalist presents in an epic fashion. It'll be the fastest 215 minutes you'll spend in a theater. From the very beginning, The Brutalist doesn't skimp on the majesty. A Holocaust survivor journeying on a ship to America and a new life looks up, smiling, to see the Statue of Liberty as trumpets blare. But his view revolves and Lady Liberty spins on screen, the first symbolic hint in this monumental epic that his version of the American dream will turn upside down. It is about anti-Semitism and the capitalist adventure, about the unassimilated immigrant experience, and about American can-do naivety versus the tragic, painful depths of European culture and expertise. This is a film with thrilling directness and storytelling force, a movie that fills its widescreen and 3.5-hour running time with absolute certainty and ease, as well as glorious amplitude, clarity, and even simplicity, and yet also with something darkly mysterious and uncanny to be divined in its handsome shape. It feels as if it must be based on a real-life case, or at least a literary source, but this is an original screenplay by Corbet and his co-screenwriter Mona Fastvold. It is the biopic of an imaginary Hungarian architect and Holocaust survivor, Laszlo Tuth, who comes to the post-war U.S. in poverty but begins, or rather revives, his distinguished career with the impulsive, eccentric patronage of a wealthy man with the WASP presidential name of Van Buren. This is a bluff and patrician fellow who has the good taste and imagination to recognize Toth's gifts, but is finally to demonstrate a dark side in his bigotry, violence, and envious shame at his own mediocrity. Toth is played with angular fierceness and passion by Adrien Brody, a career best for him surely, and an advance on his performance in Roman Polanski's The Pianist. His wife Erzsébet Felicity Jones and orphaned niece Zsófia Raffi Cassidy are marooned in Europe, caught in a bureaucratic muddle. Toth's breezily prosperous cousin Attila, Alessandro Nivola, first offers Toth a job in his Philadelphia furniture store, but his American Catholic wife, Attila has converted to Catholicism and anglicized his name, is fatefully to take against Toth. His only male friend is Gordon, played with dignity and restraint by Isaac de Bancoli, a widower, military veteran, and single dad whom Toth met in the breadline. And Harrison Van Buren is wonderfully played by Guy Pearce, with rich tailoring, face whiskers, and a plummy, booming tone born of an addiction to Madeira. It may have been inspired by the John Huston voice that Daniel Day-Lewis found to play his tortured oilman in Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood. From the very first, there is something ominous in the half-starved European artist's encounter with the plump American plutocrat, perhaps in his encounter with the U.S. itself. When Toth staggers up from the hold of his immigrant ship to get his first ecstatic look at the Statue of Liberty, he is dazed, woozy, and the statue looms disturbingly upside down, like the upside-down shots in Corbet's comparable Euro-American parable, The Childhood of a Leader. Toth gets a job remodeling Van Buren's library in his palatial estate. Although Van Buren knows nothing about it, the job was commissioned as a birthday surprise while he was away by his bumptious and slippery son, Harry Van Buren, Joe Alwyn. Toth is thrilled by the possibilities in the library's high ceilings and its overhead atrial light source, forms that appear to inspire his work for the rest of his career. Although it is only at the very end that we discover what the actual inspiration is. Van Buren Sr. is initially furious at his idiot son, presuming to get these scruffy foreigners to rebuild his library behind his back, but then decides he is delighted by the bold modernist reimagining that makes the library look larger than it is. A dinner guest of Van Buren's says it looks like the endless library in a short story he read once, presumably Borges's The Library of Babel. So he offers Toth a king's ransom and also uses his political contacts to get Erzsébet and Zsófia into the U.S. so that Toth can mastermind the building of a vast community center in the town in memory of his late mother. A huge and metastasizing folly, rather like the Xanadu mansion in Wells's Citizen Kane. Van Buren, in fact, insists on regaling Toth with his own Rosebud moment, when he humiliated his impoverished grandparents, who had been cruel to his beloved mother, but begged him for money once he'd made it big. But Toth's haughty perfectionism, quick temper, and his own problems with drink and drugs make the project an ordeal. The Protestant locals are suspicious of Toth as a Jew, and costs overrun from the start, despite Toth telling his patron how cheap concrete is, as opposed to marble. It seems, moreover, that Van Buren's detested grandparents loved marble, which further disposes Van Buren in favor of concrete. When the pair of them finally visit the spectacular Carrara marble quarries, an extraordinary late sequence, it is another ill omen. The Brutalist obviously takes something from Ayn Rand, but also from Bernard Malamud and Saul Bellow in its depiction of the U.S. immigrant adventure and the promise of success. But maybe Corbett and Fastvold go further and faster into how dizzyingly sensual and sexual it all is. The film shows us the violence and the savagery, not the same as brutalism, that go with capitalist failure and success, with Van Buren Sr. and perhaps Jr. guilty of rape. It is an electrifying piece of work, stunningly shot by cinematographer Lowell Crawley and superbly designed by Judy Becker. I emerged from this movie lightheaded and euphoric, dizzy with rubbernecking at its monumental vastness. It's a strong contender for the best performance of the year in any film. Pearce balances him perfectly, playing Harrison as a force of selfish nature, giving the film a much-needed jolt from his very first moment on screen, and perfectly capturing the kind of wealthy monster who discards anyone around him once he's used them up. The Brutalist is also a technical marvel, most notably in Crawley's fluid cinematography, crafting compositions that look gorgeous in 70mm without ever feeling overly showy. His work is organic and beautiful, and it's anchored by excellent editing from David Django and an effective score by Bloomberg. The sound design as a whole is a load-bearing beam in this film's construction, from the hum of that first scene to the many sequences of men at work, the background noise of the American dreams after World War II. Some will look at the 25-minute runtime of The Brutalist and bring out that dreaded word when it comes to serious long movies, pretentious. Of course, it's pretentious. You couldn't make this movie effectively without pretension. But one person's pretentious is another's ambitious, and I wish we had more movies this pretentious, this unapologetic, this willing to do more with film than so many even consider. The Brutalist is a work that incorporates well-known world history into two of the definitive forms of expression of the 20th century in architecture and film, becoming a commentary on both capitalism and art. Both are essential to the story of the human experience. Both can be beautiful, both can be brutal, the childhood of a leader. Brady Corbet's swaggering 2015 debut feature about a fascist dictator in the making wasn't a masterpiece, but it held itself like one, declaratively even cockily and ambitious in its thematic reach, formally grandiose in its execution. If you didn't think it was a truly great film, if, like this critic, you found its brio verged on the pompous, it nonetheless promised one from the American actor turned director, then still a few years shy of 30, Vox Lux his brilliant cracked mirror portrait of the pop machine enthralled many while deterring others, but here it finally and undeniably is the big brawny chef d'oeuvre that makes the C for Corbett, joining the ranks of modern American majors. More detail, the most surprising thing about Brady Corbett's monumental new film, The Brutalist, is that it is neither an adaptation nor based on a true story, epic, literary, and intelligent. It has the look and feel and runtime of a literary adaptation, and yet stands on its own as an entirely original cinematic creation. It is quite frankly shocking that an original work such as this has been breathed into existence in this form in 2024, and yet, here we are, the first and last truly great mature film of the year. The Brist is easily one of the finest ruminations on American ID and ego since Paul Thomas Anderson's 2012 masterpiece. The Master, the tale of a visionary architect struggling against obstacles, both internal and external. The Brutalist dares to suggest there's a crack in the foundation of post-war America, and that this crack is spreading at 215 minutes. With built-in intermission, it's an epic that begs to be seen on the big screen, ideally in the rare 70mm print, which will be running at the TIFF Lightbox this holiday season. As far as I can tell, writer-director Brady Corbet is neither an architect nor Hungarian nor Jewish. And yet Corbett, along with co-screenwriter Monica Fastvold, has managed to craft something which speaks to all three facets of the Brutalist identity as inhabited by lead character. Lo Tufa Adrien Brody Toth is a Jewish-Hungarian architect who in the film's enthralling opening sequence arrives on Ellis Island to visions of an inverted Statue of Liberty, no less, on a boatload of post-war refugees in 1947. Interestingly, New York is not his destination, as he soon boarded a bus to Philadelphia, home to a cousin Alessandro. Nia and his Gentile wife Emma, who run a furniture shop, that too proves a temporary home as Toth eventually finds himself in the rural Exeter of Doylestown, Pennsylvania, home to wealthy benefactor Harrison Lee Van Baron Guy Pearce. That New York center of the universe is merely a way station on Toth's Hero's journey is one of several nice touches in this film, which admirably avoids cliché and mostly shows restraint with its subject matter. That subject matter being no less than the American dream. Even Doy Stone, the Brist suggests, can be the locus of creative genius and a place where titans clash, but to reduce the Brutalist to mere allegory does a disservice to the very specific time and place Corbet is working with, and the very specific character he has invented, i.e., a Jewish outsider striving to carve out a place for himself in 1950s America. Toth is the core of this film, with Adrien Brody in what will surely be an Oscar-nominated performance, fully bringing to life a character who is at once a bundle of contradictions, a genius who makes dumb choices, a survivor who harms himself, and an artist with a clear, uncompromising vision. We spend nearly the entirety of this 3.5-hour film with Brody on screen, and he earns every minute of it. Brody, whose mother is Jewish, Hungarian, clearly gave his all for this performance, and it shows. Even his Hungarian accent is accurate. The one suspects there's some dubbing involved in the scenes where he actually speaks Hungarian. Pearce is also very good as Van Baron, the conservatively minded industrialist. His line of work is left tantalizingly obscure, though we learn he owns at least one rail line and a shipping company, who initially recoils against Toth's designs before realizing the cash he can acquire by attaching himself to Toth like many a wealthy philanthropist before him. Van Buren's lack of a creative instinct leads him to purchase it from others. If he can't make art himself, at least he can own the artist. Some of the writing is clumsy or obvious via Corbet SL Fastvold 4, getting the writer's edict to show, not tell. This is especially true for the film's handful of too eloquent monologues, although the script, to its credit, lampshades these moments by having other characters comment on the speechifying the brutalist female characters are thinly drawn. A problem that's particularly pronounced with Toth's wife, Felicity Jones, who does not appear until after the intermission and isn't given nearly enough to do. It doesn't help that, unlike Brody Jones, neither looks nor sounds particularly Hungarian. That said, in a film full of actors doing accents, Australian guy. Pearce as American, Adrien Brody, and Felicity Jones as Hungarians. It's Joe Alwyn's absurd attempt at a mid-Atlantic accent, which is the most distracting. He sounds like a cartoon. Cary Grant Corbet's decision to split the film into two parts is also risky, since it inevitably invites comparison. The first half is simply more exciting, better constructed, and more realistic than everything that follows. Indeed, a morbidly dark turn in the second half, Corbet giving too literal meaning to the film's themes in a single wildly unnecessary scene threatens to derail the film entirely, though Brody's performance saves it from teetering over the edge. Still, it's the latter part of the film where everything coalesces, particularly with its gut punch of an ending, which instantly throws a long, retrospective shadow over the preceding 215 minutes. It might seem hard to believe after 3.5 hours, but it will probably make you want to rewatch the film right away. The Brutalist is also one of those complete films in the sense that no aspect of the production has been overlooked. The soundtrack is phenomenal, whether it's Daniel Blumberg's ominous recurring theme or the excellent period-accurate song selections. The cinematography on 70mm VistaVision is impressive and makes full use of an ultra-wide screen format, which hasn't been used in Hollywood in 50 years. Cinematographer L. Crawley has an eye for striking visuals, whether it's the slow trickle of water down the face of an uncut slab of marble or the foreboding stillness of a flooded underground chamber. The production design is, of course, some wow moments earned purely off the reveal of a Toth design realized in a physical space. There are shades of Fellini Birdman, and especially Burr 2, his own brutalist masterpiece, the conformist looming large over this one in The Brutalist. But it's a line from Copa that sprung to mind while I was thinking about this film afterwards. I believe in America. These are the first words you hear in The Godfather uttered by Am. Marigot Bonachera moments before asking Don Corleone to arrange the murder of the men who assaulted Bona's daughter. That's a hell of a darkly ironic note to start a film on, suggesting that everything which follows the brutality, the betrayals, the excess is the Jica of which Bonachera speaks. It's a line that could easily have found its way into The Brutalist with its cast of refugees. visionaries, drug addicts, envo riches, and others grasping towards the false promise of America, it's also a sentiment which must be taken with a large grain of salt. These characters may believe in America, but it's an America of violence and of hypocrisy, and it's an America which doesn't necessarily believe in them in the Brit. That proves especially true for the Jewish characters who have fled anti-Semitism in its most extreme manifestation, only to arrive in a country where similar sentiments bubble just below the surface copa, whose own depiction of a visionary architect happens to be one of the worst films I saw this year, knows a thing or two about. The American dream deferred. If the Brutalist represents a passing of the torch of sorts, however coincidental then, Brady Corbet has earned that torch upside Statue of Liberty, and all one of the beauties about living in a film-centric city like Los Angeles is attending early screenings of movies that won't be released to the public in weeks, if not months. I was fortunate to watch Brady Corbet and Mona Fast, the Brutalist, at the Arrow Theater as part of Beyond Fest's lineup. The energy in the room was palpable. A few audience members flew out of state to watch the film flying back home that same night. Others waited in the standby line for tickets. Since 4 a.m., the screening started at 6 p.m. People were counting down the minutes for the movie to resume during its intermission. They ran to concessions or got in the long line for the restroom that began inside the theater. So was the chaos worth the hyper around the Brutalist set between the 1940s and 1980s visionary architect Lotuf Adrien Brody? Asteroid City arrives in America from post-war Europe. He escapes the horrors of war to rebuild his life and work in a strange new country. As a Jewish man, Lo settles in Pennsylvania. There, Harrison Lee Van Ban, Guy Pearce, mayor of Easttown, a wealthy and prominent industrialist, recognizes his architectural talents. He hires Lo to come at a heavy cost. Epic isn't enough to describe the Brutalist. There's something impressive about a $6 million feel-good movie which transitions into a dark drama have such a massive scale it's almost at the level of a high-budget blockbuster like Dune. Part 2, The Brutalist, is a sweeping tale of the American dream. Most importantly, it questions imaginative people if aspiring to create is worthwhile when your art hurts those dearest to you. Corbet and co-C screenwriter Fast V don't sugarcoat this thematic through line. They often go to upsetting lengths to show the physical turmoil it can cause on the eye. Body. Everyone wants a piece of your talent and will stop at nothing until they have a part. This is a sentiment shared by many filmmakers, including Corbet, as he stated in the Q&A following the screening to say Adrien Brody has never been better should feel wrong coming from a performer of his stature. However, that statement rings true here. There is a stoic nature to Brolo, a stoicism that hides a deep sense of pain and resentment. As an immigrant, you often encounter individuals who view your experience as some kind of luxury. To brag about their support comes off as performative, not genuine. Brody conveys this beautifully through his line delivery, his interactions with the supporting cast, and the physicality brought to Lo when he needs to be funny. His timing is impeccable, having to catch up with Guy Pearce's effortless charisma. Pearce may have delivered my favorite supporting role of the year in The Brutalist. From the He Shows Up, he takes command of the scenery, drawing attention to himself and making everyone opposite of him feel small. His introduction is played for laughs, a personality trait stretched out for the entirety of the movie's first half. Meanwhile, there is a sinister nature to how he seduces the audience into liking him, similar to what he does to Lo. Once the second half kicks in, Pearce's Harrison slowly drops the mask and reveals the evil within him. Just as the film shifts tonally, it's a brutal change for our roster of characters, albeit one that fits the core theme of the immigrant experience. It portrays the torture that creates something magnificent for people with selfish interests. A light is at the end of the tunnel amidst the darkness. When Felicity Jones enters the picture, she becomes the anchor for both Lo and the film until the end. Jones brings a sweetness to Urit Laszlo's wife that is, enchanting. Her sweetness should not be mistaken for weakness, though her strong character shines through, holding her ground opposite Brody and Pearce. A confrontation between Urit, Harry Joe, Alwyn, Kinds of Kindness, and Maggie Stacy Martin, the Nighthouse Harrisons. Children comes on top as one of the movie's best, most tense sequences. in which Jane's talents are at full display. The Brutalist holds admirable performances across the board, although none would be as emotionally compelling if it were not for the way cinematographer L.L. Crawley's photography captures the actors and the landscapes. Corbet and Crawley's decision to shoot The Brutalist on 35mm film stock using VistaVision cameras later on scanned at a resolution close to 70mm proves to have been the right call. The movie's visual style feels timeless yet haunting. Structures are framed as these intimidating behemoths, reducing our main players to nothing but insignificant ants in their presence. At the same time, there is also a warmth and beauty to them, coming to life in the sunlight and promising a future filled with potential visuals are just one half of the complete picture here, though the sound design is just as unreal as the moving images. Somehow the sound captures the absurdity, hopefulness, horror, and manipulation that our characters undergo. Composer Daniel Blumberg adds to the auditory delight with his magnificent original score. Earlier I mentioned the film's tremendous scope, and a part of selling the Brutalist scale comes from Blumberg's work as Lowe grows obsessed with creating the perfect building for Harrison. The score keeps reaching highs that make you as pumped for the work as much as Lello is. With that said, Blumberg does stop every once in a while to represent the abuse each character inflicts on the others through hauntingly beautiful music. His soundtrack is one of the year's best scores, alongside Hans Zimmer's Dune Part 2 and Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross' efforts in Challengers. It fills me with joy that the great American epic is still alive and well today in 2023. Christopher Nolan proved audiences crave intimate storytelling. A la There Will Be Blood or Schindler List with his Best Picture winner Oppenheimer. While I don't see The Brutalist being a massive hit, as Nolan's epic movies of its kind are, relevant and important to our current climate. What does it mean to be an artist? Can we aspire to be better when surrounded by people who only want to take advantage of what we can offer? Hate and violence remain prominent in our lives. So what can we look forward to for us to keep going? Those are tricky questions you will have to answer for yourself, but also meaningful inquiries The Brutalist presents in an epic fashion. It'll be the fastest 215 minutes you'll spend in a theater extra. Information: we must be careful how we throw around the word masterpiece, and yet it seems in entirely appropriately for Brady Corbet's towering achievement, The Brutalist years in the making. At one point, a completely different cast was announced for the film. Corbet's sprawling, nearly 4-hour epic is cut from the same cloth, or perhaps I should say chiseled from the same stone, as great masterpieces like Citizen Kane, The Godfather, and more recently There Will Be Blood. And like those three movies, The Brutalist is a distinctly American masterpiece. A story that reflects the triumphs and horrors of the ethereal thing we call the American experience. These are stories of great men bursting with wild, potentially dangerous ambition, and how they found a way to encase that ambition in the still developing America of the past. An ever-changing, ever-growing thing impossible to pin down. All of Corbet's films are like mock history lessons, biopics, for people who never existed but feel real. His feature debut, The Ominous, The Childhood of a Leader, told the story of the youth of a dictator to be in early 20th century Europe. Corbet followed that with Vox Lux, a gloriously deceptive story of an American pop star in the 2000s. The film was released in 2018, but Corbet says he deliberately had the film's timeline end in 2017, so viewers watching it in 2018 would receive it as a recent history, as opposed to a contemporary movie. Now, with The Brutalist, Corbet, working with frequent co-writer Mona Fast, is telling the story of an immigrant rising up in post-World War II America spanning decades. The film begins in the late 1940s and ends in the 1980s. The Brutalist is nothing short of overwhelming, a staggering, brilliant, gorgeous work that demands to be watched large. It feels almost miraculous. Although Corbet's film runs a whopping 215 minutes, complete with a 15-minute intermission, it never drags. Indeed, this might be one of the fastest 3-hour and 35-minute movies you'll ever see if Corbet had tacked on another full hour to the film. I don't think I would have complained, even when the intermission arrived. I found myself hoping it would hurry up, and so I could get back to the movie shot in beautiful VistaVision. a technique that allows Corbett and cinematographer Lowell Crawley to create vast frames that feel somehow pulled from history itself. The Brutalist is cinematic alchemy heightened and enhanced by meticulous production design and costuming that feels wholly authentic in showcasing its various time periods, aided by a host of brilliant performances and encompassed by Daniel. Bloomberg's pounding, brooding, jazz-infused score, a score Corbett refers to as both minimalist and maximalist, creating a sense of movement. One of the best pictures of 2024, one of the best pictures of the last 10 years. The Brutalist is the type of movie that reminds you why you love movies, opening in the late 1940s. The Brist begins with arrives in America. We follow Lowe as he climbs up from the dark, cramped bowels of a ship and comes onto the deck to catch a glimpse of the Statue of Liberty, which is forebodingly shot upside down. As Bloomberg's score rings out notes that sound somehow both triumphant and terrifying. This is the land of opportunity, and you should be both awed and afraid, Lowe played by Adrien Brody. Adopting a pitch-perfect accent, was a brilliant architect back home, but then the war came and Lowe ended up in a concentration camp. Along with his wife Urit, Felicity Jones, Lowe has managed to escape to America, but Urit and their niece Zofia Rafi Cassidy are still in Budapest, and Lowe doesn't even know if they're still alive. Lowe eventually arrives in Philadelphia, where he's informed by his cousin, Alessandro Nila, that Urit and Zofia are both still living. News that overwhelms the former architect, who it should be noted headed to a bordello and failed to be able to perform with a sex worker almost as soon as he stepped off the boat. Attila has an American wife, Emma, and has even Americanized his last name, something he and Lowe both laugh about, although it's clear this change makes Lowe somewhat uncomfortable. The first sign that life in America will come with some caveat. While Lowe was a celebrated architect, back home in Philadelphia he begins working as a lowly designer in Attila's furniture store. But from this small beginning, the seed for something grander will be planted. Brody, gangly and haunted, moves through these early moments of the film with a combination of both confidence and shyness. He's clearly a man who understands his talents and yet his unseen to us, at least Holocaust experiences, coupled with the fact that he has to build his life all over again, have rendered him hesitant and reluctant. He needs to find something to latch on to, and soon enough he does when he's hired by a local rich kid Joe Alwyn to build a library as a birthday surprise for a newly minted millionaire industrialist named Harrison Lee Van Ban. Guy Pearce in these early moments of the film. The Brutalist sneakily keeps Harrison off screen for as long as it can. We know he's rich, we know he's powerful, and when he finally shows up, he's furious. The library was supposed to be a wonderful surprise, but Harrison is instead outraged that Lello and his crew, which includes a black man, have mucked up his sprawling home. It's our first sign that Harrison is somewhat detestable. And then the film walks that back after a falling out with Attila and losing his job at the furniture store. Lowe ends up living in a shelter and working a dangerous construction job. He's also developed a heroin habit. And here at seemingly the lowest point of his life, Harrison tracks Lowe down. Apologizing for his bearish behavior, Harrison reveals that Lowe's library design with unique moving bookshelves has become a phenomenon among high society circles. He pays Lowe the money he owes him, invites him to a party, and then makes Lowe an offer he seemingly can't refuse, the chance to build something. Massive Harrison wants Lowe to build what could be technically be called a community center. But in Laszlo's hands will be something far greater. Lowe dreams up a huge, imposing, brutalist design that will rest perched on a hill and feel like a city unto itself. The building will house a theater, a gym, and even a chapel, something Lowe scoffs at but agrees to when he's told it will help smooth things over with the locals. Harrison trusts Laszlo's skills and more or less gives the architect free rein to do whatever the hell he wants, and what Lowe wants is to create something no one has ever seen before. Here we can see Corbett and co-writer Fastvold moving the pieces into place to show what could be seen as both Laszlo's rise and fall. The very nature of films tells us that something is bound to go wrong as Laszlo's vision expands, but that doesn't mean the Brutalist is predictable. Corbett also makes the fascinating decision to keep the structure Lo is, creating something of a mystery. We catch glimpses of it in model form and see its shape begin to come together on that hill, and yet it feels almost intangible, like Lowe and those around him. We must imagine this visage before we can actually see it eventually, with the help of Harrison's connections. Urit and Zofia arrive in America. Reuniting with Urit was seemingly imperative for Lowe, and yet when she arrives, he seems strangely distant, especially when he sees that his wife is now in a wheelchair due to osteoporosis, something she intentionally avoided mentioning in letters she sent. The arrival of Urit shifts the film's mood as everything begins to fall apart around Lowe Harrison, who started the film, shouting angrily at Lowe, only to then soften and begin treating him warmly, begins to show signs that he'll only stand for so much, and reveals a cruel streak. He may see Lowe as a great artist. But Lowe is also a foreigner of meager means, someone beneath the waspish power of a man like Harrison. Lowe, meanwhile, begins clashing with seemingly everyone. His workers, his wife, the middleman, Harrison has brought in to help make sure things run smoothly and don't go too over budget. Darkness and certain doom lingers at the edges of the frame. Time marches on, and Lowe grows more furious and disillusioned at every turn. Unable to deal with anyone would dare stand in the way of his vision. These people do not want us here, he thunders. At Urit at one point, summing his frustrations up by highlighting his ness. No matter what he does, no matter what he achieves, his thick accent will always make him an outsider. The snobs that are part of the high society that Harrison belongs to smile politely in Laszlo's face, but he can hear them whispering about him behind his back. Bro carries the weight of this on his shoulders, making Lowe wholly complex and believable. His brilliance cannot hide his frustrations and flaws, and his relationship with Urit is somehow both loving and fraught. Jones plays her part delicately, keeping Urit somewhat mysterious. As great as Brody is here, he's matched by Pearce, who does a phenomenal job luring us into Harrison's web. We come to like this guy until we realize that deep down Harrison is an obscenely rich man who thrives on power and dominance, a grinning, glad-handing monster. As the Brutalist unfolds, we can feel the tides of post-war America. Shifting the passage of time is highlighted by the way L-Cell's structure rises up out of that hillside like a strange stone flower in a very centralized story. Corbet encompasses the hopes and dreams of untold numbers of immigrants who came to the shores of this country hoping to thrive, only to clash up against those who came here before them. Corbet also takes us away from America in one of the most haunting passages in the film, as Lowe and Harrison travel to the Italian town of Carrara to look for Mabel's cinematographer. El Crawley shoots the marble core in a way that invokes the power and abundance of nature, coupled with man's thirst to chip and haul it all away. It's during this part of the film that some of the most troubling story elements arrive, casting the entire film a completely different light, all set against a world of haunting natural beauty by the time The Brutalist arrives at its ending, complete with an epilogue that makes you want to go back and rewatch the entire film with new context. I found myself feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, and yet exhilarated. Watching The Brutalist has the feeling of reading a great, sprawling work of literature. As you near the final pages, you're both thrilled at having made it through the journey, while also wishing there were just a few pages more. I enjoyed Corbet's previous directorial efforts, but nothing in them quite prepared me for the experience that is The Brutalist, a film that feels like some sort of secret history being written before our eyes. Yes, it's a masterpiece from the very beginning. The Brutalist doesn't skimp on the majesty. A Holocaust survivor journeying on a ship to America, and a new life looks up, and Lady Liberty spins on screen, the first symbolic hint in this monumental epic that his version of that American dreams will turn upside down. The Brutalist is a toxic tale of the immigrant experience and a gripping narrative of love and hope, tested through vice and struggle. Co-writer S.L. Director Brady Corbet's brilliant drama out of 4 rated R in select theaters. Friday nationwide in January features Adrien Brody playing a Hungarian Jewish architect taken advantage of by those who held him a shoe-in for Oscar's Best Actor category. Brody leads a stellar cast through decades of a post-war America that promised to take in the huddled masses, but never said anything. Them right in 1947, Lowe Toth Brody comes to the USA having survived terrible trauma during World War II, and forced separation from his wife, Felicity Jones, who's being held at the Austria-Hungary border by Soviet soldiers with her niece, Zofia. Rafi Cassidy-Lowe travels to Philadelphia and moves in with his cousin Nachilla, Alessandro Nila, to help his furniture business. A job goes south that sour their relationship, but does put Laszlo's talents on the radar of rich industrialist Harrison Lee Vane Guy. Pearce, having seen newspaper clippings of Laszlo's Brist-style buildings and his work up close, Van Buren becomes so smitten that he commissions Lowe to build an ambitious institute in a rural area outside Philly as a memorial to the wealthy man's late mother. While Lowe is a fictional character, his experiences are inspired by key real-life figures of the Brutalist movement. The gig checks Laszlo's key boxes: a job to design a masterwork and an opportunity to unite with his family. However, as the movie moves into the 1950s, mutual resentment boils between L.O. and the Americans around him, both elite and working class. They almost all look down on him, and he, being an egotistical perfectionist, goes into a rage when everything isn't to his specifications. "We tolerate you, Harry Joe." Alwyn Van Buren's snake in the grass. Son hisses at the passionate builder, and then there's Van Buren himself, a temperamental boss who holds power over Lello whenever he can in front of Urit Van. Buren remarks upon her impressive English and crewy quips that she should help her husband, who sounds like he shines shoes for a wage before flinging a penny at him. Brody is phenomenal, navigating Laszlo's emotional journey over several years, capturing the confidence of an artist who knows exactly what he wants, as well as the insecure flaws of an individual distracted by drugs and women. The character is an interesting counterpoint to Brody's Oscar-winning role as a surviving musician in the 2002 Holocaust. Drama The Pianist. I suppose that inside he worships at the altar of only himself. Urit says of her husband, Jones is terrific as well, first appearing as a weak figure in a wheelchair, thanks to devilishly counters his co-star's efforts with sheer punchable antagonism. Van Buren is the absolute worst detestable menace and an apt metaphor for the modern mogul. But the biggest breakthrough of the Brutalist is Corbet, for his third cinematic outing with co-writer SLP partner Mona Fastvold after the childhood of a leader in Vox. Lux, he has crafted a magnificent film with the sweeping scope of The Godfather and the dark idiosyncrasy of There Will Be Blood. The production design is incredible, and the sights, including a marble quay in Italy, are stunning. Plus, you won't hear anything better at the movies this year than Daniel Blumberg's minimalistic score, with brassy themes matching the cinematic grandeur and a solo piano accompanying Lowe's more thoughtful internal moments. This film, directed by Brady Corbet, written by Brady Corbet, Mona Folt, produced by Trevor Matthews, Nick Gordon, Brian Young, Andrew Morrison, Lauren DJ Geenum, Brady Corbet, starring Adrien Brody, Felicity Jones, Guy Pearce, Joe Elwyn, Rafi Cassidy, Stacey Martiner, Isaac Debo, Alessandro Nia. Cinematography, Will Crawley, edited by David Geno, music by Daniel Bloomberg. Production companies, Brookstreet Pictures, Kaplan, Morrison, distributed by 24 United States Universal Pictures. Focus Features international release, states September 1st, 2012 in Venice, December 20th, 2024 in United States, January 24th, 2025 in United Kingdom, running time 215 minutes countries, Hungary, United Kingdom, United States, language English, budget 6 to 10 million. So guys, this is the review of the Brutalist movie and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.